Círoבין Perish Gimel, Mishnah Gimel. This Mishnah is based on four principles. Principle number one is that Chazal will not gozer on a shavus, that is an Issa D'Rabbanan, to be done bein hashmoshes, if the reason for doing the shavus is because it's a tzorech mitzvah. Number two, that is Erev Techumin is done solely for the purposes of a mitzvah. That is, you want to extend the distance one can travel in order, for example, to be able to visit a Rebbe, or other reasons which are mentioned, the tzorech mitzvah. Principle number three, that the actual kinyan of the acquisition of the reshus for the purposes of Erev Techumin, it is legally effective bein hashmoshes. And principle number four, that when he is kona shavisa, that is, he acquires his new place which allows him to go for a further 2,000 amas, that the place where the eruv, that is the food, is placed, has to be in the mokum where he is kona. In other words, who ve'eruva b'mokum echad. Now, based on these four principles, the Mishnah, we can understand this Mishnah. Nesono va'ilon, if he put his eruv, he put his food in the tree, lemalo me'asora tefochim, above 10 tefochim high, and above 10 tefochim high, and the tree has a mokum which is dalet tefochim by dalet tefochim, therefore high up in the tree, above 10 tefochim, would have the status of a reshus hayochid. Then ein eruv eruv, since he wants to be kona eruv at ground level, he is in one place, the eruv is in another place, and he can't bring the eruv to the ground floor because that would involve being motzi from a reshus hayochid to a reshus harabim. Therefore, the eruv is invalid. However, if it was lemato me'asora tefochim, if he placed it in the tree but below 10 tefochim, then the status of the place in the tree would have the status of a caramelis. To be motzi, to carry the mozen from the caramelis into the reshus harabim, would only be an issa midrabanon. An issa drabanon, that is bein hashmoshes. Therefore, based on the first principle we mentioned, Chazal will not goes a shvus bein hashmoshes, and therefore he could bring his eruv into the same place as where he wants to be kona shaviso bein hashmoshes, and the eruv is kona bein hashmoshes, and therefore it's a valid eruv. The son of a bur, if he put his eruv in a bur, in a pit, and this pit is in the middle of a caramelis, afilu omok mea amo, even if that bur is 100 amos deep, in which case it would have the status of a reshus hayochid, eruva eruv, because in order to bring his eruv into the place at ground level where he wants to be kona shaviso, that would involve doing an issa drabanan, being motzi from a reshus hayochid into a caramelis. Well, a shvus is permitted bein hashmoshes l'tzorech mitzvah, and therefore it is a valid eruv. Nesona barosh hakona, if you put it on the top of a cane, o barosh hakundus, at the top of a long pole, bismanshu tolush v'nods, afilu gavoa mea amo, even when it's bismanshu tolush v'nods, it's uprooted. And then the kona is uprooted from the ground, and it's though it's pressed in the, it's actually placed in a reshus harabim, but it's not actually embedded deeply in the ground. Even if it's 100 amas high, hareza eruv, because the top of the kona being above 10 tefochim in a reshus harabim and not having a base of dalet tefochim by dalet tefochim would be a mokum patur. To be motzi from a mokum patur into the reshus harabim would be permitted, and therefore there's no reason why the eruv should be an invalid eruv. However, nesono b'migdal, if he put it in some sort of chest, ve'ovad ha'mafteach, and the key is lost to this chest, hareza eruv, that would still be an eruv, even though that would involve an issa drabanan. The only way of getting access to this migdal would be by cutting the door of this migdal is held together, the bolt is held together by means of a rope, so you would have to cut the rope. That would involve, that's a mekalkel, it's issa drabanan, and nonetheless, it's an issa drabanan which could be done at tzorech mitzvah bein hashmoshes, and therefore it would be a good eruv. Rab Lezer says, Im eino yodea shamafteach bimkomoi eino eruv. If he's not aware that the mafteach is in its place, and therefore inevitably it would involve getting a knife in order to cut the rope, then it would not be an Eruv. The reason being, according to Rabbi Lezer, is because that would involve two shavusin. Number one, it would require you to take a knife, and Rabbi Lezer is of the opinion that you can only take a dover muktzah letzorach for a permissible act. To do it for something which is not permissible, that in itself is an issa. It's also letaltel es hasakin. The knife would be considered to be muktzah. And number two, you'd have to cut the rope, so it involves two acts of issa drabonon. And therefore, according to Rabbi Lezer, where it involves two acts, therefore, in order to get your Eruv in the same place, to have complete access to the Eruv, involves two Isurim, and therefore we wouldn't be matter in such a case two Shavusim ben Hashmoshes l'tzorech mitzvah, and that's why ein Eruv Eruv. The halacha, in fact, is not like Rabbi Eliezer. I should point out, we mentioned before that when the kona or the kundas is tolosh v'noritz, it's in the Rishus Harabim, but it doesn't involve having to cut it down in order to get to the Eruv. The point being, if you did have to cut it down, although that would only be so if it was planted if it was fully embedded in the ground in order to get access to the Eruv, then even though that would only involve an Issa Drabonon to get the Eruv to put it on at ground level, in such a case it would be forbidden, because the reason why the Chazal asked it would be because of a gezero you may come to do an Issa Diraisa. And though we have said that we are matir a shvus ben hashmoshes on tzorech mitzvah, a type of Issa Drabonon which is put in place because of a gezero that you might come to do something min haTorah, such a shavus was not permitted ben hashmoshes, and that's why the Mishnah mentions bismanshu tolosh v'noz. If the kona is tolosh v'noz, that is, it is in the Rishus Harabim, but it's tolosh, it's not deeply embedded in the ground. If it were deeply embedded in the ground, then in order to get the Eruv, we make a gezero. Shemaya Katsetz, that you might come to cut down the pole in a similar way that you might come to cut down a tree, which is a gezero midiraisa. You may come to do a malacha diraisa, and such is not permitted ben hashmoshes. And therefore, in such a case, if the kona was deeply embedded in the ground, then we would say ein Eruv Eruv. And that's why the Mishnah says bismanshu tolosh v'noritz. It's uprooted from the ground, although it's embedded in the ground, but not deeply embedded.